Wrathspring by Gav Thorpe. Something noisome carried on the wind. The reek was born of blood and rotten offal and rodent droppings. It was a harbinger, the vanguard of a thoroughly loathsome tide. Not just the air carried the taint. The Wrathwaters knew what was coming. Even the springs-fed surge churning down from the peaks of the White Stair could not clear the pollution from the winding waterways and rising pools. The trees drew in their roots, sickened by the presence of the corruption. Fish lay gut to sky, rotting amongst withered leaves and decaying rushes. In the heart waters below the rivers and lakes, deeper than the delving of millennia-old trees, the miasma of decay spread through the veins of the forests, the font of wild magic, the essence of life, the meltwater of souls, thickened into sluggish swells, bloated and bubble-ridden like a stream choked with noxious gases and rank sludge. Diraceth, Leafmaster of Clan Arleath, felt all of these changes. Upon his bark, in his sap, on the tips of his taproots. The cloying, stifling chaos taint was like a fungus on his spirit, leaching his essence, spreading fibrous tendrils through the lands of the Wrathwaters into every part of him. It was hard to rouse himself, even with the strength of the long-awaited blooming forcing rivulets of life energy into his body. All of the worldwood sickened. It was folly to believe that the Wrathwaters could hold out. Better to succumb, to give up the last clinging vestige of life. Oblivion was preferable to further torture, the never-ending gnawing of soul and strength. Lord! Caliceth, the branch witch, had climbed into his upper limbs and was dragging her wood talons against his rough bark, insistent but not painful, nor deep enough to draw sap. Her heart song was an agitated twittering like the alarm of a bird. On her shoulder, a glimmer-silk grub twitched with agitation. "Lord Diraceth! The Ratmen, they come at last! They come for the Lamentary!" He opened deep green eyes and looked at the slender tree maiden. The Solpod Groves, his voice was sonorous, as deep as the earth into which his roots ran. He quivered at the thought. Diraceth's drooping branches scattered leaves onto the surface of the lake. Around him the blood willows responded, straightening their trunks, pulling up ruddy-leafed limbs. Beyond his copse, other spirits were answering the growing strength of the clan song. His fellow tree lords rumbled echoes in their diminishing slumber. Sylvaneth warriors stirred in the dappled gloom at the water's edge. Polished wood and firestone of bared blades caught the scant sunlight, scattering glints like water droplets. "No more pestilence, no more sickness," Caliceth continued. "Ratmen with blades, with spears. Creatures we can fight. Creatures we can kill." The thought brought Diraceth further from his slumber, drawing up an influx of the essence of Ghyran, the magic of the realm of life streaming through his sap. "A poor move," he growled. He let his roots fall away and drew up a foot, skaven, always impatient. Another 100 seasons, and we would be quite beyond resistance. "There are many, Lord." "There always are, my Glade daughter." Diraceth levered his other foot out of the sodden lakeside bank and took a step, his sap continuing to rise. It felt good to move again. "Rouse the clan! We go to war!" The wailing of trees competed with the deafening chitter of rats. Arboreal screeches and thrashing leaves beset the river glades of the Wrathwaters as the skaven advanced within a bank of burning mist. Tainted by warpstone, the death fog of pestilens scorched leaves and blistered bark. Droplets of warp-touched acid settled on the pools and mirrors, sinking slowly into the waters with greenish trails. Diraceth waited, ignoring the pulses of pain that ran through him from the wickedly deep cut across his trunk. A wound that still seeped with the corrupted taint from the blade of the plague priest that had struck him. He wept streams of thick sap, the agony of his body nothing compared to the injuries inflicted upon his domains. The Tree Lord Ancient could feel a shudder of misery throbbing through the pools and rivers every time the filth-ridden missiles of the catapults crashed through the canopy. A dozen of the accursed engines had pounded the last scraps of territory for 2 days, littering the banks and water with heaps of steaming, disease-ridden offal and corrupting shards of warpstone. Most of the trees were dead, and the rest had retreated with the sylvaneth. Beyond the painfully slender ring of forest sheltering Clan Arleath, the Wrathwaters had been turned into a steaming mire, a wasteland of sucking marsh and drifting, suffocating clouds. They waited, the last Wrathwater scions of Glade Winterleaf. They waited without hope. At their backs lay the life pool, the last vestige of their home. Heart seeds covered the surface, but the replenishing waters did not rouse the spirits within. The taint of the skaven came before them, quelling the life force that sustained the lake of the sacred grove. Even more faintly, luminescent heart seeds gleamed beyond the perimeter of the clan's remaining realm. Lost in the fog, overrun by the skaven, beyond reclaiming by the branch witches. As the last of the warp-wounded trees succumbed to the deadly miasma, the Wrathwaters fell silent. The impenetrable mists surrounded the dell, obscuring everything beyond a bowshot of the water's edge, revealing only dim silhouettes of trees bowing beneath the effect of the toxic cloud, curling like parched leaves. Diraceth shifted, sensing that something approached through the mist. Drums. Slow beating drums. The death fog muted the sound, every percussive rumble seeming to come from all directions. The distant crack of catapults had stopped too. Diraceth could hear the rustling of his gladiators and the creak of the other treefolk as they shifted, turning to and fro to watch the closing mists. "We die here," the Leafmaster told his glade kin. He looked down at Calicaith. Like all of them, the branch witch bore the injuries of furious battle against the Chaos Ratmen. Her leaf limbs were snapped, her arms scored by deep marks from notched, rusted blades. On the shore of our life grove, we fight to the last. No more retreats. Without our soul pods, there can be no Clan Arleath. The sap in his veins felt clammy and cold. The last of the Wrathwaters were succumbing to the encroachment of Pestilens. Diraceth could feel it like claws dragging at his spirit, trying to pull him down into the ground to suffocate him. "There!" hissed Calicaith, pointing a talon towards the fog. Others were calling out, indicating a growing darkness in the mists, the approach of the plague monks. Along with the somber beat of the drums drifted the sound of feet splashing through the swamp. Screeches split the air a few moments before individual shapes solidified and burst from the fog bank. Fanatics bearing fog-spouting censers sprinted towards the line of sylvaneth, faces flecked with saliva, thick tongues lolling, eyes wild. They swung their censer maces in wide arcs, surrounding themselves with wreathing spirals of poisonous fumes. Diraceth let his will flow back into the sustaining pool. He pushed his essence out into the remnants of the Wrathwaters, tapping into what little life magic remained. He felt a reciprocal force, as the Wrathwaters themselves sought a response to the invaders. "'Tis the last time your feet shall sully these lands, children of the horned rat!" bellowed Diraceth, letting his rage flow free in a torrent of magic. The ground beneath the onrushing censer-bearers erupted with the Leafmaster's power. Tiny rootlets sprang into full-grown rushes that speared up through the skaven, spitting them as surely as any lance strike. Grasses with blades like swords slashed through others, turning ragged robes and flesh to red tatters, gizzards hanging like blossoms on the tips of their rapidly growing stalks. The spattering of running feet heralded the final rush of the plague monks. Hooded and robed, the ratmen advanced out of the fog bank, rank after rank of snarling, spitting vermin. With them they brought a great wheeled altar, on which was hung a giant censer of burning warpstone. The fumes from this infernal engine streamed over the coming horde, roiling and bubbling with a life of their own. The sylvaneth did not wait for the skaven to charge, but counterattacked at a signal from their lord. Dryads and tree revenants fell upon the chaos vermin with sweeping branches and shredding claws, their war song like. The cawing of crows and shriek of hunting hawks. The plague monks fought with serrated daggers and warpstone-tipped staffs, their own cries every bit as strident as the calls of Clan Arleath. The greater treefolk, Diraceth's glade cousins, were about to move forwards to support their smaller kin, but the Leafmaster halted their long strides. Caliceth glanced up at him, feeling it too. The Leafmaster pointed into the fog. "Await, kin of the glades! Do you feel its presence? A greater darkness comes upon us this eve." As he spoke, the sensation grew stronger. It was like a deeper pit in the darkness that was the Pestilens horde. The magic of Ghyran swirled as it approached, turned away like dead leaves before a gale, scattering and burning at its touch. In the fog, something as large as Diraceth loomed through the withered remains of the trees. The Leafmaster drew in all the life magic that he could, expelling it as a storm of sharp, glittering kernels that parted the encroaching death fog. As the miasma billowed back, it revealed the demonic master of the skaven. A crown of curling, twisted horns framed its huge, rattish head. Its tail was like a barbed whip longer than it was tall, tipped with rusted blades. Pink-grey flesh was draped in a ragged brown tunic, over which sat overlapping plates of serrated oil-black armor. A helm with long cheek guards protected its skull. A huge book hung on its waist, chained to a thick belt of hide, and an unnatural breeze fluttered the pages, spilling forth seeping tendrils of sorcerous mist. The dark magic of the grimoire was like a heavy weight in Diraceth's thoughts, an artifact of corruption and decay wholly anathema to the Leafmaster and the life-giving magic that had given birth to him. Bellowing wordless hatred for the greater demon, the Leafmaster's tree cousins stomped forth, whipping lacerating limbs against the Vermin Lord's armor, thrusting penetrating branches towards its flesh. The creature reeled back, allowing more of its underlings to stream forwards, hurling themselves at the tree lords and tree revenants, while the arboreal giants crushed these attackers beneath root-splayed feet and pulverized them with hammering fists. The rat demon belched forth a noxious cloud of vile fumes. The treefolk retreated from this poisonous mist, their bark withering and drying at its touch, blighted sap erupting from widening skin cracks and splitting knotholes. At the touch of the sorceress fumes, their leaves shriveled to blackened wisps. Low moans of pain made the earth shake. All around the ancient, the song of his kin was falling in volume as spirit after spirit fell silent. He tried to rouse them with base urgings of his own, infusing them with his renewed desire to fight. Snarling, glittering spites erupted from Diraceth's canopy as he stormed forwards, surrounding him with a whirling shield of biting, spitting spirits. He hardened his limbs into lance points and drew his arm back, ready to strike. The demon creature turned, as swift as any of its rapacious minions, its tail whipping around Diraceth's arm. The two titanic beings braced against each other, pulling, each trying to tear the limb from their foe. Fog swirled and lightning crackled around the demon's free hand. It coalesced into a four-tined spear. Stepping closer, allowing Diraceth to drag it forwards, the greater demon of the horned rat plunged the weapon into the trunk of the Leafmaster, the points opening up the wound already marking his bark. Chaos power flared through the injury, 1,000 tiny bites engulfing Diraceth. He lashed out, throwing dagger needles into the face of his foe. Ripping the spear free with a spray of golden sap, the skaven beast stepped back, its tail unwrapping from Diraceth's arm. The Tree Lord Ancient staggered away, life fluid spurting in thick fountains from the gash in his torso. He thrust a hand into the wound, growing branch fingers to bind it together. The Ancient felt the burn of the chaos magic, tiny flecks of corrupted rust burrowing through his exposed heartwood. Even as he stumbled and almost fell, Diraceth let forth a retort. Vines burst from the broken ground at the monster's feet, snaking around its legs, seeking its throat and eyes. The Vermin Lord took a step closer, spear raised for the kill. Diraceth looked up into its red eyes, undaunted by its horrific majesty. The Vermin Lord hesitated. As it was about to strike the blow, it shifted, cocking its head to one side. A moment later, a breeze rippled through Diraceth's leaves, fresh, restorative,
The fogs were swirling, becoming ragged tufts on the gusts of a new wind. The darkness beyond was diminishing, overpowered by a burgeoning yellow gleam. Sunlight. Warmth touched Diraceth. The heat of the sun, the power of Ghyran. With it came a new spirit song. It was like nothing he could remember, swelling up from the heart rock of the ground and cascading down from the sky, melodic and subtle, but dramatic and discordant all at once. Fueled anew, the wound in his chest sealed by the magical touch, the Leafmaster surged to his feet. His hands crooked into wicked blades as he advanced towards his enemy with renewed purpose. The demon thrust its spear into one of its own followers, spitting the mewling plague monk upon the points. Sorcerous lightning crackled again, forming an arc that pulled the skaven apart, its scattered body forming a swirling circle of green fog that flickered with chaos power. Through the miasma, Diraceth felt a yawning chasm, a deep shaft that dropped away between the physical realms. The demon stepped into the fresh gnaw hole with a last look at the Leafmaster. Though its expression was impossible to read, the spear thrust towards the ancient was a clear threat. This would not be their last encounter. With a wet, sucking noise, the portal closed, the remnants of the sacrificed plague monk splashing to the mulch-covered ground. Diraceth's attention was drawn back to the strange sunrise. The fogs were almost completely dissipated now, taking on more of the cast of mountain lake mists at dawn. The plague monks felt it too, and having been abandoned by their immortal master, did not take flight, but threw themselves upon the sylvaneth with frenetic desperation. Where the gold light touched, the Wrathwaters responded. The blackened, withered morass burst into renewed life, saplings and bushes springing forth from the groundwaters, blossoming into full growth as Diraceth watched. The rush of magic flowed around and over and beneath him, through air and water and ground. Heart seeds thought lost in the mire, crackled with energy amongst the fronds and strands of fresh growth. He heard the tremulous strains of their nascent soul songs quivering into life, ready to grow into fresh generations of sylvaneth. Behind him, the waters of the life pool glimmered with the magic of birth. Sylvaneth souls that had long been repressed by the noxious flow of skaven corruption suddenly burst into full bloom, brought to fruition by the influx of life essence. Out of the heartseeds his clan had salvaged from the incessant skaven encroachment burst forth a fresh surge of dryads, branch wraiths, and tree revenants. These newborns splashed out of the waters, their birth songs tainted by rage and bloodthirst, and they fell upon the skaven with vengeful cries and haunting moans. And then it was as though the sun itself entered the sacred grove. The presence was blinding, both in light and as a spring of the energy of Ghyran. Diraceth could not quite comprehend what was in their midst. All senses, both physical and spiritual, overwhelmed by the force of the entity that had arrived. The sound of thrumming wings made the air and ground vibrate. Heat prickled on his bark, like fingers caressing the folds and cracks, bringing forth green buds where they passed. As the wave of life magic seeped into the earth of the grove, its power restoring tree and spirit alike, the Leafmaster looked upon their saviour. Her wings were feathery streamers of dawn light, luminescent and hot. Her face was serene, her eyes a rich leaf green. Diraceth met that godly gaze and felt a moment of connection, from root to branch, spreading out across the entire realm of life. Here was the font, the spring of creation, the mother of his people. Arleath, Everqueen of the Sylvaneth. His gaze moved away, freeing him from the trance. It was now that he saw that his goddess was not as he remembered, in robes of autumnal growth. She wore armor, her body clad in shimmering plates of birch silver edged with ironbark and studded with firestones. The apparition held a spear as tall as she was, its head shimmering with destructive magic. The Leafmaster watched as she turned her attention to the skaven. Arleath's tranquil expression changed, and the light of her presence changed with it. Ear twisted her features. The dawn light aura became a crackling halo of incarnate fury that burned with the fire of an unrelenting noon sun. "Kill them all!" she commanded, in the voice of a burgeoning storm. As her children eradicated the stain of the Ratman from her realm, Alarielle's anger faded. It did not disappear completely, for how could she not feel rage whilst her children teetered on the edge of extinction? She could not rest while her people in the realm of life and far beyond suffered from the malignance of chaos. But for the moment, in this place and at this time, her vengeance was temporarily sated. She held up a hand and the heavens opened at her command, bringing rain as sweet as nectar. The Wrathwaters responded to her call, swelling in a spume-topped mass over the shores of the lakes to wash away every vestige of the skaven. Her treekin set down their roots as the deluge swirled past them, making sanctuary for the smaller sylvaneth in their branches. A glorious wind swept down from the Loreneth peaks, driving away the last of the ratmust. The rustle of green leaves and the creak of swaying canopy was a song in her ears after the thunder of the skaven drums. While the floodwaters drained, a carpet of new grass and flowers in their wake, Alarielle turned her attention to the deeper wounds, the taint laid upon the souls of the Wrathwaters. She settled, furling her nebulous wings, letting her armor fade so that she could feel cool breeze on her flesh. Its touch brought flashes of recollection, scattered images of her previous lives. She held the pain at bay, a mortal memory not suited to an immortal spirit. Alarielle purged the taint of chaos from the Wrathwaters, using her magic as she had used the Wrathwaters, driving out the corruption from the lowest earth. She became part of the realm of life, splitting again and again, allowing her essence to be one with the land and water and air. She tumbled over rocks, her cleansing current bringing fresh water to algae-swathed pools where rat corpses bobbed. Her essence eased through cracks, nourishing the broken-stemmed plants, the pressure of her spirit forcing the magic of life into the deepest roots of the maligned forests. She lapped against the banks and gurgled over the rapids, reed beds and rushes growing fulsome in her light. Lilies rippled on the pools amidst the crackle of life magic shimmering in the waters. She nestled with the crabs in the sands of the Scarlet Sea, into which the vast delta of the Wrathwaters flowed. All that lived felt her coming, renewed by the Everqueen's magic. Even as she danced on waves as sparkles of sunlight, she spiraled along high branches. Blossom erupted in her wake, snapped limbs healed and trunks marked by welts and rot were made anew. Winds carried the Everqueen's spirit far over the swamps that had engulfed the Wrathwaters. From murky pools sprang every variety of marsh flower in a profusion of rainbow colours. Even in the darkest regions she could not be denied. Grubs and beetles, worms burrowing through the dark mud, acted as a conduit for her power. Bringing together her energies, Alarielle ascended, leaping skywards from one drop of falling rain to another. She reached the clouds and looked down upon the great rivers and winding streams of Clan Arleath's territory. Renewed, it stretched in vibrant greens down to the white sands of the coast, and was lost in the haze of the mountains. Higher still she climbed, into the stars bordering the celestial realm. She could feel Ghyran, the realm of life, pulsing and changing, awakened by her return. Yet it was only the start, the first breaking of bud through hardened frost. All across her lands, chaos lay like a choking clot, stifling and repugnant. Even to touch upon it in thought revolted the Everqueen. The pollution made her soul sicken. They had come so close to ruin. Chaos had almost overrun everything. Though the enclaves of the sylvaneth were like bright sparks, they were almost lost in the darkness here and in other realms. Even the great glades where Alarielle had arisen as the War Maiden seemed like a pinprick against the vast, pustulant expanse. And through the decay, on the far side of the rot and destruction, she could feel the thunderous heartbeat and ponderous breaths of the power that desired dominion over her. Life perverted, built upon death. The tendrils of Nurgle's gardens stretched far and deep into the Jade Kingdoms,
coursing with vile purpose, throbbing with vigorous intent. And the gnaw holes of the skaven ran like maggot trails through rotten meat. So close to utter destruction, so much to reclaim. It seemed not so long ago, to her immortal reckoning, that she had conquered all, that victory over chaos had seemed but a breath away. Yet it had been lost, and the darkness had prevailed again. Alarielle woke, returning to her physical shell. In her absence, her council had gathered. Mighty tree lords and ancients from across the royal glades, and woodland clans. The old king of Winterleaf conversed with Leafmaster Diraceth, newly reacquainted with his clan cousins. Their senior, the High King of Oakenbrow, noticed first the return of the Queen. Rippling his leaves, he pushed silence out into the song of his clan, quietening both it and their boisterous mood. "The Wrathwaters run fresh once more, Jade Mother," the High King intoned solemnly. "Clan Arleath returns its strength to Winterleaf, and your reach extends once more. Whither now shall the attention of your host fall?" She ignored the question for the moment and beckoned to the Winterleaf conclave. "Attend me for a moment, lords and ladies of Winterleaf." The tree beings approached, their silver bark and leaves pale in the sunlight. A procession of branch wraiths followed, wearing long coats of golden leaves, each accompanied by a tree revenant. Spirits of the forest clad in the guise of wood dwellers from an older age. In stately accord they arrayed themselves behind the tree lords, bowing before their queen. Diraceth was ushered forwards by the High King. The ancient approached with eyes cast down, his long strides slow and purposeful. Calicaith and a few branch witches nestled in his limbs. They averted their gaze from the Everqueen. "Look upon me," Alarielle instructed. "See your queen as she is now." Diraceth looked up, almost flinching. He met her gaze for a moment and then looked away, branches trembling with shame. "I am thankful, bounteous goddess, but unworthy. I have failed you and the Winterleaf clan, but for your miraculous presence, the Wrathwaters would be lost forever. Our God was not strong enough." "You are not alone in such tribulation, and I do not absolve you of blame. But know this, Leafmaster. Clan Arleath held when others did not. The Wrathwaters, though tainted, remained a part of my domain." She held out a hand and stroked his bark, comforting the troubled spirit. "You resisted a long time, long enough. Thank you, Queen of the Forests. Clan Arleath shall repay the debt in whatever fashion is required. We owe our existence to you, Mother of Hope." "Mother of Hope no more," Alarielle replied, her expression turning grim. "The Avenger, the Scourge, the cleansing sun I have become, none failed the Jade Kingdoms more than I, and none has more for which to atone. No, my queen, that is not so. It was not the lords of the clans that turned back at the very brink of victory. It was not my ancient warriors that lacked the heart to finish what had been begun." Diraceth said nothing, not understanding what she meant. Even he, an age old as he was, could not remember the first wars against chaos, when the realm of life had been wrested from their grip and the sylvaneth first born. Alarielle remembered well enough, and too well the part she failed to play. How could she judge any of her children harshly, who had done more than she to resist the encroachment of Nurgle's touch, who had battled daily against the incursions of the skaven? While she had slumbered, afraid and spent, her people had died without hope. "I have returned, but I cannot bring hope," she told the Tree Lord Ancient. "We stand upon the brink of oblivion and have only taken a single step from the edge. My return will herald not hope, but war and suffering on a scale none but the immortals have known. I am Strife-bringer, Woe-seeder. Look not to me for hope, Diraceth, for I have none." "Then why?" "Because we must fight or surrender. Victory is so far away that even I cannot see it. But it is not victory for which we strive at the moment. This is a war to survive, to push back from the precipice, to claw our lands free of the grip of darkness and corruption." Alarielle stepped back, her canopy wings turning to golden streamers behind her. "I guarantee nothing, Leafmaster, but bloodshed, misery and death. I am clothed in the light of the sun, but I cast the shadow of the grave. Without hope, without even hope of hope, will you fight beside me?" The Leafmaster lowered himself to one knee, a lengthy process accompanied by much creaking and swaying of his branches. "You fight without hope, majestic Sun Queen, but I cannot deny mine at your return. In the mire of despair I almost succumbed. With the great lords and ladies of the royal glades to stand witness, I swear I will not show such weakness again." Alarielle gestured for him to rise. He retreated to the company of his clankin as the Everqueen addressed her entire council. Her voice carried without effort, as thunderous as a waterfall, and yet like the sigh of a playful breeze. There was greater purpose in coming to the Wrathwaters than freeing Diraceth and his kin. The path to the Vale of Winternight has been opened. A fractious rustling disturbed the council. The Willow Queen of Harvest Boon voiced the discontent. "We are not yet strong enough to reclaim the Vale of Winternight, Dawn Queen, and little will its liberation add to our cause." "What of the besieged clans of the Verdant Cliffs?" suggested the Archduke of Ironbark. "Or the Mooncrags," added the Oakenbrow High King. "My bud brother holds still against Foulslug and his corrupted host, a brave ally." "We owe it to those that stayed loyal, my queen," said the Willow Queen. "More allies will bring greater strength." "The bargain has already been struck." The voice was a whip crack like snapping limbs, silencing the others. The members of the royal moot turned like a forest bending in a new wind, directing their glares to the speaker, the Keeper of Dreadwood. Bark blackened along one side by recent battle. The scarred ancient stepped forwards. Fanged and clawed spite revenants swung through his limbs, whispering angrily to their master. "The Dreadwood fight no less than any other royal glade," the keeper snarled. He thrust an accusing limb at the councillors, fingers stained dark with the blood of humans and skaven. "And the sap of other sylvaneth, if the dark rumours were true. At the Emerald Moors my kin and folk fought beside you, Everqueen, for promise that my forest kin of the Winternight would be freed from captivity." "A fortress holds them," said the Oakenbrow Ancient. "Many heartseeds will be scattered to take it from the enemy." "No fortress can stand against the will of the forest," countered the keeper. He looked at the Everqueen. "And the royal moot does not stand against the will of its ruler. What say you, Alarielle the warrior reborn?" "They did not answer our call for aid," said Diraceth before Alarielle replied. "We offered aid when the Rotbringers came, but they did not want us. When pestilens beset the Wrathwaters, they turned a deaf ear upon our pleas for help. Ancient Holodrin cares nothing for others. Clan Feich are traitors to their own, corrupted seeds that fell far from their mother tree." "Recant your accusations," roared the Dreadwood Keeper. "Vile lies." "The truth burns deeper than flame," retorted the Willow Queen, moving to stand between the Dreadwood entourage and the Lords of Winterleaf. Her branch wraiths jeered and snarled at their counterparts in the Dreadwood, and tree revenants looked on with glowering stares. "My word is the law," declared Alarielle, drawing herself up to her full battle aspect. The spear of Kurnoth appeared in her right hand. Her other manifested as the talon of the Dwindling, flaking dead wood falling from her fingers as glittering dust. "I have spoken, and so it shall be. Clan Feich live on, trapped within the festering walls, hiding in the deepest shadows. But they are not yet lost, not to death and not to darkness. I feel them, their pain and suffering. We shall free them. Go now, spread the word, ready your armies." The Keeper of Dreadwood withdrew, bowing in deference to the Everqueen. The others followed in turn, their leaves rustling with murmured apologies. Only Diraceth remained, trembling with sorrow and rage. "You will find nothing but rot in the heart of the Vale of Winternight, my queen," he said quietly. He uprooted and turned away, following the trail of rucked earth left by his clankin. Alarielle diffused her power again and sighed. She no more wanted to travel to the Winternight than any of the others. But the Keeper was right. A bargain had been made, and it needed the alliance of all the royal groves, including the Dreadwood. If she was to reclaim the Jade Kingdoms from chaos, she would have to win back the loyalty of the outcasts, the dark and broken spirits she had denied. There had been a time when the Vale of Winter Night might justifiably have been called a jewel of the Jade Kingdoms. Though an age had passed during her slumber, Alarielle could still recall the white and silver trees, the sparkling mists that rose from the tarns each morning, the threads of streams that glittered on the walls of the deep valley. Dark rock and bright ice, that was how she remembered this place, how it had come by its name. The twin peaks that stood as sentries to the valley were steep-sided, their white-clad summits lost in the haze of cloud above the vale. The Sisters of Serenity they were called, but there was little peace to be found on their slopes since the coming of chaos. A bastion had been raised across the mouth of the Vale of Winter Night. Running from one sister to the other in an uneven line, she could feel the wall like scar tissue on her flesh. It was not a thing merely built, but constructed from the spirit stuff of the lands, warped by corrupted magic into something far more hideous than a simple fortification. It was a mortuary thing made of corpses and tree carcasses, heaped between with black rock and baked earth, a core of dead roots binding its foundation. Thornweave grew along its length, spines as long as swords, seeping toxic sap that would slay even the sylvaneth. In 3 places the wall was broken by broad arches, through which flowed the great rivers of the vale. Gone were the bright waters. Now the banks brought forth bile, blood and seeping ichor. Their pollution stained the groves into which they flowed, carrying the taint of chaos into the Jade Kingdoms and towards the shores shared by the Wrathwaters. The bastion was broken irregularly by 7 towers, each grown from an immense tree with branches of bone and fumaroles where knotholes should be, spewing a dark smog along the entire wall. Cadavers hung from the branches like fruit, and on the dead flesh puckered fungal growths and bright moulds. The stench of death lay on the vale as surely as the fog mire of the towers. The corruption was near total. Alarielle could scarce stand to be so close, as though she walked on the borders of Nurgle's garden itself. She shuddered at the prospect of wandering into such accursed territory, but it was for this reason that she had come. Here the grip of decay was so great that the realm of chaos and the realm of life were almost indistinguishable. From this vile sanctuary, the warriors and demons of Nurgle could march with impunity to conquer and despoil. Just as sight could not penetrate the fog shrouding the valley past the wall, so the chaos magic held at bay the questing tendrils of the realm roots sent forth by Alarielle. Linked to all the parts of the Jade Kingdoms, the realm roots allowed her and her children to pass from one glade to the next without effort. In such fashion had they come upon many foes unaware of their approach and encircled even enemies that were. The Everqueen was balked by the corruption. There would be no infiltration from without, and so heavy lay the hand of Nurgle she could scarce detect the tiniest flutter of spirits within. But they were there, she was certain of it. She heard their lamentations and felt their despair. As much as the other royal glades despised the Dreadwood, they were all her children, wayward or not. She bore the suffering of them all with equal sorrow. The ground trembled and the realm roots quivered as Alarielle sent the summons to her royal moot. Life force swelled like a springs-fed tide, pulsing along the arteries of the Jade Kingdoms, each flutter the spirit of one of her children. Along the realm roots surged the power of the wildwoods, animated by the will of the Queen, root and branch responding to her demand as surely as the clansfolk of the glades. The wildwoods ploughed towards the wall of decay, bush and tree and grass flowing like an incoming sea, until it reached the extent of her power, just a bow shot from the wall. There the grip of Nurgle was too great for her to push through. Only when the plague bastion had been broken, when her children entered the valley, would she be able to thrust her power deep into the heart of the enemy and tear it out from within. With the wildwoods came the glade hosts, from Oakenbrow and Harvestboon, Ironbark and Winterleaf, Gnarlroot and Heartwood, Dryad tree maids and ancient tree lords, tree revenants in arboreal likeness of the ancient dwellers of the world that was. From each royal glade, from their clan groves spread across the reclaimed realms they came. And like the touch of first frost creeping along a stem, The army of Dreadwood heeded her call. Led by their keeper, they came into the wildwoods. Tree spirits and forest kin that had dwelt long in the shadow of chaos. Vicious and bitter spite revenants accompanied them, and branch wraiths and dryads that had been cast from their clans for their disruptive behavior and bloodthirsty ways. In the near-forgotten time of reconquest, when Alarielle had required alliance with Sigmar and his kind, such creatures had been a liability, preying on allies as well as foes. Now the Everqueen needed them back and was willing to deal with whatever consequences that might bring. "Break it," she told her children, pointing at the wall. Her voice rippled through the realm roots, touching the spirit of every sylvaneth that had gathered. "Tear it asunder and make bloody mulch of its defenders. Open up the veil for me, my children, and become the vengeance we all crave." Diraceth advanced with his clan elders, proud to stride amongst the great army of the Winterleaf Glade. His lawmasters walked beside him, two ancients called Drudoth and Kedial, and behind came the lesser nobles and forest folk of Clan Arleath. Each stride that took him closer to the looming wall made his sap rise in ire. Through his roots he could feel the death and decay woven into the barrier, seeping into the good earth of the Jade Kingdoms. It was a deeper, more malignant curse than the gnaw wounds of the skaven. He felt his leaves shriveling at its touch. The sylvaneth host pushed out from the sanctuary of the wildwoods, a gathering of spirits such as Diraceth had never witnessed before. Tree lords and ancients by the score led their clans, following the stern warriors of the royal glade households. Hundreds of tree revenants and thousands of dryads flowed from the mystical forest, thorn-fingered and bright-eyed. And on the periphery, from the darkest patches beneath the boughs, the outcasts came. Like shadows they lingered near their clans, spite revenants that lusted after mortal flesh, whose wickedness had earned them exile in ages past. Diraceth noticed that more than half the host of the Dreadwood was made up of these dispossessed spirits, and wondered what manner of clan they marched to liberate. Ancient Holodrin and his folk had always kept to their own glades, but it had been a shock when messenger spites of Diraceth had returned with tidings that Clan Arleath would stand alone against the skaven. The forest host passed into the thick smog. It smeared along Diraceth's leaves and bark, slicking his twigs and buds with its oily, noisome touch. The branch witches and branch wraiths spat and cursed and flicked droplets of the foul vapour from their talons. By his side, Calicith adjusted her grip on the long greenwood scythe she carried. Her glimmer silk grub wriggled back and forth across her shoulders, reacting to the tension. "I can see nothing," she said. It was true. The smog was as thick as marsh water. It felt as though Diraceth waded through a mire as much as pushed through the dank fog. He could barely see the branch witches and ancient tree lords to either side. The armies of his fellow Winterleaf clans were lost from view. "Press on," he told them, sensing the unease of his folk. Their spirit song was quiet and flat. Diraceth set free his own song, a martial beat that resounded through the thoughts of his followers. He quickened the pace of his stride and the tempo of his war song. It was then that he felt the glade voice of the old king, calling him on, adding its weight to the harmony of Clan Arleath. And the other houses around him, each clan's song different, but called from the same source, creating a growing chorus, making his sap rise further. Like an echo rebounding, the booming of the ancients was returned by the heart songs of the lesser folk, a staccato of expectation and fury over the deliberate percussion of their leaders, the intensity growing as they continued through the smog. Diraceth was taken aback as they broke through the fog and came upon the wall itself. The mists were still thick, but the great darkness of the edifice rose up before the ancient, more than twice as high as his topmost branches. The spirit song reached a crescendo as Diraceth and the tree folk charged the bastion. It sang in his heartwood, filling him with strength and purpose. He raised his own voice, urging his clan to prevail. Thorny tentacles lashed from the wall, and a storm of projectiles flew down from above. Dryads were snared by the blood vines and crushed, tree revenants pierced by the spines. Bloodsap fell in glimmering rain, showers of light in the dark fog. Bellowing his rage, Diraceth hurled himself at the wall, sinking branch claws deep into the blackened mud. Forming rootlets from his fingers, he pushed deeper, feeling the bone and sinew of dead animals parting, trickles of ichor dribbling down his arms as though blood from a living thing. He ignored the slash of the thorn vines against his bark, leaning close to the filthy wall to penetrate deeper and deeper with his thrusting attack. Calicaith and the other branch witches led the clan maidens up his back and across his upper limbs, leaping from branch to reach higher up the wall. They ascended through the bodies of the other tree lords and ancients, and set about with scythe and claw to hew at the pseudo-tentacles. Spreading rootlet fingers wide, Diraceth pulled back, wrenching the guts from the wall. Like intestines splayed from a wounded animal, ropes of rotting flesh and sodden wood erupted from the bastion. Hurling the vegetative offal aside, the Leafmaster attacked again, tearing and ripping, splitting foundation roots and rib cages, engulfed by spores from exploding fungi. Around him, the other noble spirits tore at the skin of the bastion, severed. Roots flopping like eels on the ground, broken pustules spewing ichor over limb and trunk, matting their canopies with greenish-yellow gobbets. With a sound of snapping bone and branch, a portion of the wall collapsed into a rotten heap. Armoured warriors toppled into the morass, crashing into the piles of steaming mulch. They struggled to their feet, reaching for rusted axes and serrated blades. Their armour was pitted with corrosion, the plates covered with a film of filth that leaked from rents and breaks in the metal. Some were bloated creatures, their guts barely contained by their armour. Others were skeletal-thin, rusted mail hanging loosely over famine-wasted frames. The dryads shrieked in triumph and leapt upon the Nurgle warriors, their claws seeking visors, piercing chainmail at the joints of their armour, pulling the warriors apart. Other foes, more lightly armoured, leapt down onto Diraceth. They sawed at his limbs with their blades and jabbed spears into his knotholes and cracks. "Begone, minions of the Decaying One!" rumbled the Tree Lord, plucking a tribesman from his branches. He crushed the human in his fist, splitting him like over-ripened fruit. Lanceclaws speared another, piercing him from belly to throat. Diraceth flung the corpse away and turned swiftly, shaking another 3 of his assailants from his canopy. Widening the gap in the wall, the ancients stepped into the barrier while more branch wraiths and dryads scaled the breach to spill along the rampart above. Pulling up the last vestiges of the wall, Diraceth broke through into the valley proper. Elsewhere the bastion was breached too, the sylvaneth flowing into the Vale of Winternight like water through a broken dam. "For the Everqueen and the Jade Kingdoms!" rose the roar of the Tree Lords. Spite revenants flowed around Diraceth, snarling, eager to be at the enemy. He recognized spirits he had banished from the clan long ago, but they paid him little heed. Their hatred now focused on a mutual foe. Their enraged howls were quickly joined by the cries of dying Chaos followers. Seeing that the wall had fallen in many places, her subjects pouring through the breaches, Alarielle sent the summons to her own grove host. Her song carried the furthest of all, light and lilting, rippling through the wildwoods, and the rootways to all parts of the reclaimed kingdom. She held out a hand to one of the nearby wildwood trees. Its trunk shuddered, and a knothole parted, disgorging a bulbous grub. Though but a larva, it was as long as her forearm. It crawled over the leaf-carpeted ground and burrowed into the magic-rich dirt at her feet. A few moments passed before the ground under her feet started to tremble. Leaf and earth parted as an immense swarm of glinting fireflies erupted around her. Swirling like sparks, they coalesced into a single creature. The massive Wardroth beetle bore up the Everqueen, its carapace glistening like oil, antlers gleaming in the light of Alarielle's aura. She added a fresh melody to her call, the long note of a horn that echoed through the trees. Haunting, distant replies drifted back to her, rebounding and growing in volume. She felt the flow of magic changing, becoming a stream and then a river, converging on her location from many directions. From the trees came forth her Kurnoth hunters, each taller than any warrior of chaos, with bark stronger than metal armor. Some carried long straight swords, Others bore scythes that could slay the largest mortal monster with a single blow. The rest were armed with great bows, accompanied by scurrying quiverlings, spites that grew fresh missiles from their backs. Their leader, Ralderath the Huntmaster,
came forwards and bowed low. He looked at the broken bastion, wooden brow furrowing. "A harsh task, my queen," he said. "Though the wall be broken, the Vale of Winternight holds an army of foes." "Yet not enough to hold back my ire," said the queen. "With me, hunters of Kurnoth, your prey awaits." High upon the hunched back of the Wardroth beetle, her wings of light flowing behind her, the Everqueen advanced quickly through the wildwoods. The Kurnoth hunters spread around her, loping strides carrying them as swiftly as their queen. More tree lords and ancients answered her call as she moved. Among them marched the mightiest of the old nobles, the spirits of Durthu. The fog had all but dissipated, and as Alarielle emerged from the wildwoods, she saw that 2 of the 7 towers had fallen. Yet from the upper reaches of those remaining, missiles and fire cascaded down upon the spirits surging through the breaches. "Break the towers! Bring them down!" she commanded. The spirits of Durthu responded to her command, breaking away to fall upon the nearest fortification. She felt the swirl of magic as the revered tree lords summoned the energy of the Jade Kingdoms, letting it pass through their bodies. It erupted from outstretched limbs in gusts of emerald energy, scouring the armored warriors from the higher limbs and platforms of the tower. The tree lords smashed against the blackened trunk with their fists and stomped upon the ground to break open its foundations, root claws driving deep into the earth. Throwing their weight against the tower while others dragged at the upper limbs, 3 of the huge forest spirits sent the entire tree edifice crashing down. More armored warriors plummeted to their doom as it fell, and those that picked their way out of the splintered, black-leafed foliage were swiftly crushed by the raging spirits of Durthu. The wall was shattered, more towers falling as the sylvaneth ascended into the heights and tore at their roots. Alarielle could feel the Vale of Winternight responding. She let her essence gush free into the land beyond, bracing herself against the clammy touch of decay that still lingered within. She searched back and forth, seeking the slightest trace of Clanfeich, steeling herself against the cold darkness as she plunged deeper into the chaos-tainted magic permeating the Vale. Her song became a strident call, ringing clear through the wash of wild magic flowing into the valley. The flutter of an answering spirit song drew her into the heart of the Vale, the loathsome power of Nurgle like a cold corpse hand pouring at her body. Pressing past, she looked for the tiniest glimmer of the song's source. She found it ringed with chaos power, a cornered animal panting and whining with fear. Anger replaced Alarielle's distaste, and she forged on, fueled by ire. At the approach of the Everqueen's presence, the corruption parted, scattered like leaves in a gale, but swiftly the taint returned, pressing hard against her soul form. The grim surroundings nearly silenced her voice. The crushing stench of chaos energy was overpowering, endless waves of decrepitude and corruption crashing over her. Her light was no star, nothing more than a guttering spark in everlasting darkness. Timidity all but stilled the tongue of her spirit song. Gathering her nerve, ignoring the fear that she would draw unwanted attention upon herself, Alarielle sang loud and clear, calling to the quivering spirits of Clanfeich. She pushed back the darkness as it encroached on the path she had made behind her. The Everqueen beckoned and cajoled, tried to soothe away the primal dread that trapped the sylvaneth as surely as the warriors of the plague god. "Fight it!" she insisted, bursting forth with fresh soul song. Alarielle could almost touch them, could almost make the magic flow into the spirits to rouse them from their terrified stupor. "Reach out to me! Break free!" But they did not. Not only dread quelled them.
Bitterness spat back from the renegade forest spirits. Recoiling, Alarielle could do nothing as the grip of Nurgle tightened again. A black sludge that filled the space around Clanfeich as tar bubbling up from its pit. It hardened, seizing them fast once more. Their song was muted and deathly silence engulfed Alarielle. The Everqueen realized she was alone in the great sea of darkness. She fought back panic, searching for the rivers of life essence that had brought her here, desperate as a ship's crew tossed on a tempestuous sea. She caught upon a glimmering trail and started to follow it, but in her agitation did not sense the approach of something else. It was too late that she detected another presence in the mystical strata. A triumvirate entity. A three-spawn fly of Nurgle made into bodily form somewhere in the Vale. A sting strike, a spine of pure chaos, pierced her spirit, pumping darkness into her soul. Like a toxin in the blood of a mortal, the chaos energy flowed through her, trying to drag the Everqueen into the mire of death that surrounded her. She fled. Returning to her body, Alarielle gasped, suppressing the scream of horror that wanted to break free. Her subjects had to fight on, could not know anything was amiss. The chaos taint was still in her. She could see it now, like a blackness in her veins, darkening her skin, dimming the light of her presence. It worked fast, weakening her, trying to consume her with burning pain. Horror gripped her. All that she had feared, all that had cowed her for those long years of slumber, was coming to pass. The touch of Nurgle was in her. Beneath the surface of her being, raw wild magic and chaos power thrashed against each other, their conflict sending agonizing stabs through her. "My queen?" A spirit of Dirthu stood over her, its spirit song a somber throb of concern. She realized a single crystal tear marked her cheek, a sign of the struggle within. She took in a shuddering breath, but dared not speak of what had happened. The Everqueen mastered her fear and urged the tree spirit to leave her. Unprompted, the spirit of Dirthu lay a twig-fingered hand upon Alarielle's arm. At his touch, she felt the foul magic burst forth, engulfing both of them. The spirit's branches shuddered, and its soul song became a low moan of age-old aching. She felt the spirit drawing forth the blight. Alarielle tried to fight it, to hold the poison in herself, but the spirit would not be deterred, placing another leaf limb on her to bring forth more of the taint. "It is not yours to take," she gasped. But the spirit silently looked at her with deep emerald eyes as the corruption flowed into its heartsap. When it had siphoned away the last of the dark power, the spirit of Dirthu reared up, taking a step back from the Everqueen. Already its leaves were wilting, branches drooping with the weight of the poison in them. Its spirit song was little more than a few whimpering notes as wood turned to dust and sloughed away, revealing blistered greenwood beneath. "My queen, everlasting font of life," croaked the spirit, sinking down. Threads of mold spread over its splintering, disintegrating form. "Lead our people to fresh life. Fear nothing more. Let the wrath of the sylvaneth carry you to victory." The spirit slumped, degenerating into scattering motes and spores that drifted away, leaving nothing but a blackened heartseed. The last vestiges of its song died away with its body. She had almost failed her people again.
Freed of the taint, Alarielle calmed herself, her sorrow short-lived. In the past she had allowed fear to rule her, to break her resolve. Not this time, not now. The fire of her wrath flared from her body like a fresh dawn. Where its light touched, Alarielle's presence filled the sylvaneth with a deep rage. She drove the Wardroth beetle forwards with a thought, weapon held high. Her spirit song called to her glade warriors to follow. Incandescent with fury, the spear of Kurnoth singing its own bloodthirsty hymn in her thoughts, the Everqueen passed into the Vale of Winter Night.
If the breaking of the wall was a dam bursting, the coming of Alarielle was an ocean rising to engulf the Vale of Winter Night. With her came the wildwoods, limbs and leaves angrily swaying, creepers and thorn bushes advancing beneath their shadowed canopies. Ahead of her life magic streamed. The gale of her approach washed away the thick fog, revealing the parched lands of the Vale of Winter Night. All had been drained of vitality. The cracked earth like the dry skin of an ancient mortal. Scrubby bushes with blood-red thorns grew out of split heartseeds, and fungal fronds played in colourful profusion from the corpses of animals. Such trees as had survived were twisted, stunted things with flies as big as birds buzzing in their limbs. More insects fluttered in thick swarms, fighting against the rush of air that heralded the Everqueen's arrival. At the heart of the valley, where once had stood the life tree of Clan Fife, a tower now rose at the centre of a soulpod-studded grove that had become a thick mire of bubbling mud. Threefold were its bastions, winding about each other like vines, becoming one at the pinnacle. It seemed to have grown of tumorous bone, split and blistered, cracked and flaking. No windows broke its surface, but a single fracture formed a jagged door at its root. The warriors of Nurgle were arrayed about this fortress, grotesque and bloated, cadaverous and vile. In ranks of rusted mail and blood-spattered plate, they awaited the attack of the sylvaneth. They did not have to wait long. The earth erupted with choking, snaring vines, and the spirits of the worldwood descended upon the Nurgle army. Branch and root vied against hammer and spear, talon versus blade. Whipping leaf limbs crashed against shields marked with the fly rune of the plague god. Ensorcelled iron bit deep into spirit folk flesh. Blood and phlegm, bark and sap flew. The trembling ground beneath the stride of the Wardroth beetle set the beat of the battle song that rose from Alarielle. From her heart poured out a rhythm of defiance and death. It drove the sylvaneth, enriching their hatred as mulch fertilizes soil, filling their limbs with vigor and growth. Where Alarielle fought, the followers of chaos died. A dozen armored warriors set themselves against her advance, their axes flaking rust and dried blood. Alarielle did not hesitate but met them head on. Their blades broke on the carapace of her Wardroth beetle, and other blows went astray in the blinding light of her presence. The beetle charged without pause, trampling foes and spearing another on its antlers. The spear of Kurnoth whirled and plunged, lancing through the bodies of the survivors, fetid blood streaming from the mortal wounds left by its touch. The wildwoods enveloped the fighting, dragging tribesmen and beasts into the foliage, where birds and spites plucked at eyes and clawing twigs lacerated flesh. The screams of the dying were accompanied by the patter of blood falling like rain formed the canopy. Roots quested for the pools of life fluid, drinking deep of the Chaos followers' suffering. The outcasts were a nightmare to behold, led by the ancients of the Dreadwood Glade. Though fire and axe were set against them, the bitter forest spirits would not be stayed by the shield walls and warped spawn of the Chaos army. Armoured plate was no obstacle to piercing talons powered by magical sinew. With banshee howls of glee, dryads tore the limbs from their foes, glorying in the sprays of blood. Flesh and bone parted under the razor strikes of the branchwitches, strips of gory flesh flung into the air. So vengeful was their aspect that even as lumbering beasts crushed them underfoot, the outcasts bit and clawed with their last strength. Spiter revenants leapt into their foes without regard, happy to tear down an armoured warrior, even if in turn they were battered and slashed by the corroded weapons of their enemies. As a root prizes apart a rock, the sylvaneth drove through the corrupting host to within striking distance of the tower. Alarielle's magic washed up to the perimeter of the fortress, unable to penetrate it, but still gathering strength. The spirits of Clan Fife murmured beyond her reach, trapped. Alarielle urged them to rise up, to tear down their captors from within. She was greeted with a quiet echo of spite and dread. The gate of the tower widened with a terrible tearing of wood, and from the dark interior emerged a trio of bloated figures. The three sorcerers let free swarms of biting flies and choking mists, stalling the sylvaneth attack. Whirring, buzzing things beset Alarielle, flying into her eyes, trying to crawl into her mouth. She choked and spat, fighting back the memory of the cloying power of chaos that had nearly taken her. Out of the swarm lumbered an immense gargant, its skin falling away in strips to reveal bloody fat and muscle. Its shadow fell over Alarielle, bathing her in a sudden chill. Her beetle hissed its anger. At her command it dashed forwards, but its antlers simply sloughed away rotten flesh from its enemy's shins and thighs. The gargant seized up the Wardroth,
trying to tip the Everqueen from its back. The beetle sank its antlers deep into the sore-ridden flesh of the Gargan's hand and arm, fixing itself there while blood streamed over its head, bathing Alarielle in thick crimson fluid. Though repelled by its stench, Alarielle took the pouring vital fluid as a libation, as refreshing to her as the cascade of a waterfall. Blood-masked, she reached out with the talon of the dwindling and drove a claw into the Gargan's arm. At her bidding, dire power flowed, not the magic of life, but the turning of seasons, years, centuries. In a few heartbeats, the monstrous creature's flesh fell in dried scraps and its bones turned to dust, pitching the Wardroth and its rider back to the blood-soaked earth. A triumphant melody erupted from Alarielle, sweeping her warriors into the enemy. A great moan of despair erupted from the Nurgle host at the loss of the Gargant. Surrounded and pushed back, they were forced into a semicircle about their sorceress masters, battered and torn but not yet broken. Alarielle pulsed a warning note to her servants as she felt a surge of chaos power flow from the Dark Tower. It bubbled up into the three sorcerers, filling them with unnatural energy. The trio of warlocks swelled, metaphysically and literally, their robed bodies distending, skins stretching further and further until it split with cascades of blood. Each chaos wizard bloated beyond possibility until they formed a single quivering mass of plague-ridden flesh. With a final influx of power, the sorcerers burst, showering pus and ichor, flesh gobbets and organs over a wide area, their scattered entrails forming a triple-sided sigil of Nurgle. Within the unholy pattern, the air seethed, and the skein of reality stretched just as the skin of the wizards had done. Demonic things pressed against the thinning barrier, their power seeping through the sundered gap. Alarielle knew that in moments a host of the plague god's demons would break through, summoned by the destruction, for Nurgle found life in all death. At the heart of the flesh icon, the sorcerers remained. Small mounds of sentient meat no bigger than a fist, forming porcine eyes and fanged mouths. Yet, for all she urged her spirit warriors to attack, the line of chaos followers held amidst the bellows of ancients and the crash of blades. Alarielle summoned the depths of her hatred, and with it fueled her courage. She dared one more time to send her spirit into the quagmire of Nurgle that filled the tower. Holding tight to the threads of magic that sustained her, the Everqueen dived into the spirit morass. Ignoring the slithering, sliding things that were breaking through into her realm, she drove directly for the final remnants of ancient Holodren and Clan Pestilens. This time she would not be repulsed. Like a bolt, she sped into their midst with the full glory of her battle song. "We're afraid. You abandoned us. You will desert us again." Their plaintive wails did not sway her. Whatever wrong had been done to these spirits in the past, whatever transgressions she and they had committed against their own people, the sylvaneth fought and died as one. "I am the Everqueen, the font of life, the despairing storm, the Wrathspring. I do not command your loyalty, I demand it." She reached out, as though with her hand, and seized up the guttering remnants of the sylvaneth souls. "Your fear counts for nothing. You will fight." The ground shuddered, and a moment later, the Dark Tower split asunder, dividing into its three parts in a shower of offal and rotten wood. The great tree of the Vale of Winter Night, silver-barked and white-leaved, erupted from the falling ruin, its branches gleaming with soul pods. Alarielle's essence raced along the branches, liberating trapped spirits even as the first demons tore their way into the realm of life. Heartseeds fell like rain, and where each landed, a sylvaneth sprang forth. Branch witches and branch wraiths, tree lords and dryads, tree revenants and ancients. And with them was unleashed wrathful ancient Holodren, a towering pine lord with silver needles and claws like scimitars. The lord of Clan Pestilens brought down a foot onto the mewling flesh pile that was the sorcerer trio. Grinding them under his roots, the ancient tore the heart out of the Nurgle sigil, blood and mud and demon becoming a single bubbling cataract of dissipating power. His booming roar crashed as a wave over the fighting, swelling the war song of the sylvaneth. "The Vale of Winter Night belongs to us.
Obliterate the defilers! Screaming, bellowing, and howling, the freed spirits of Clan Fife hurled themselves at the beset Chaos warriors. "Would that I had felt such courage sooner, great queen," said ancient Holodrin, making obeisance to his ruler. The taint of Nurgle was already seeping away, fresh tufts of grass and red blooms consuming the bodies of the plague god's mortal followers. "There are none of my folk that are strangers to fear," Alarielle replied. "When all is nearly lost, one thinks only to cling to what is left. I am not guiltless in such regard. The ages have turned, and a different season is upon us. We cannot seek to simply resist our inevitable decline. A new power is coming, and we must allow ourselves to be borne up on the fresh tide, or be washed away forever." "What new power, Everqueen?" asked Holodrin. She looked up to the skies. Against any natural wind, clouds were gathering, tinged with azure light. Lightning flickered, not of any mortal origin. "We are not alone," she said. Sadness marred her divine features for a moment. "It was only fear that made me think that we ever were."